All right, let's talk about Rome. Rome is located on the Italian peninsula, which is the modern day country of Italy. It's protected to the north from the rest of Europe by the Alps, this big mountain range up here. And then it's protected from the rest of the Mediterranean world by the Mediterranean Sea, as well as the other seas that surround it. The city of Rome is located right about here in the central Italian peninsula. Rome eventually expanded out of the Italian peninsula and encompassed all of the world around the Mediterranean Sea. So, everywhere in purple on your map was eventually added to Rome. Roman religion was just like Greek religion. They were polytheistic. They copied the Greek gods, but they gave them different names. They copied the Greek temples, but they made them not as good looking. Our planets are mostly named after Roman gods. So you can recognize some Roman gods by the names of the planets. Another quirk of Roman religion was that eventually the Romans worshipped the emperor like a god. They elevated the emperor to god status. There were two major groups of citizens in Rome, and citizens could be men only, women were not citizens, and those were patricians and plebeians. Patricians were the wealthy landowning class, and the plebeians were the poor citizens. Some of them participated in the government, but they were not from the wealthy aristocracy. There were also freemen who were often former slaves, or perhaps foreigners who lived in Rome, and then there were slaves. Women also existed in Roman society. They came from families that were either patrician, plebeian, free, or slaves. They did not have the same rights as the men in those classes. Rome's law was based around the 12 tables, which were the earliest written collection of Roman laws. You can see in the graphic here what kinds of laws they had: laws about theft and debt and injury, and religion and family matters. So these were the very earliest laws from Rome. Rome eventually developed a representative democracy. So they had a government really very similar to the modern government in the United States. Citizens elected representatives who would represent them in decision making and voting on laws. This was very different from the direct democracy of ancient Athens, where all citizens voted directly on the laws. All right, let's talk about the Roman economy. The Roman economy was largely based around trade. We can see on the map lots of different trade goods that moved throughout the Roman Empire. The Romans also were connected over here in the Middle East with the Silk Road, which took them all the way by land over to China, where they were trading with people in China, and also to Indian Ocean trade routes. So there were trade routes down here off our map in the Indian Ocean, and all of those products were making their way in and out of Rome. Let's talk about Roman art and architecture. Romans were great builders. The buildings that they made were highly practical. This is one of the most famous temples in Rome called the Pantheon. It was built by Marcus Agrippa, who was like the best friend of the first Roman emperor, Augustus. And it's special because it looks like a square temple on the front, but it is round. It is a circle on the inside. This is the Colosseum, which is the most famous stadium from ancient Rome. Roman stadiums were pretty much just like our stadiums. They were just made out of stone instead of other materials, although eventually they were made out of concrete, just like ours. The Romans invented concrete. And then this is the Roman Forum, which was where all the important public buildings were. And there were temples to various emperors and these arches, which are called triumphal arches, which an emperor would have built in his honor when he won a war. Science and technology, the Romans were great road builders. They built roads that still are being able to be used today. They built aqueducts, which look like bridges, but they are not. This is a water carrying system. So there's an open channel at the top of this, and at the top it is too narrow to walk on. But there is an open channel that is carrying water. So this was how they brought water to their cities. They made arches. Arches are much stronger building structure than a post and lintel, which is where you have like two posts on the side and then something going across the top. This is much stronger, so it made their buildings much stronger. And then they had public baths. They were very concerned with health. Their baths were heated and cooled. They had cold rooms and hot rooms. They had gymnasiums where you could work out and then go and clean yourself. And the public baths were very popular and an important part of hygiene in ancient Rome. And then another technology from ancient Rome was the Latin language, both the spoken and written language of Latin, which has developed into the modern day Romance languages, named after Rome. All right. So Rome is getting going. It's a republic. They've got representative democracy. They're trading with everyone. They want to go and get some more land. And the other major empire at the time is the Carthaginian Empire, and it's located across the Mediterranean Sea in North Africa. They fight a series of 3 wars, which end with Rome winning and completely destroying Carthage. But the Rome had some negative effects from this. Many Roman soldiers died during the Second Punic War, fighting against the Carthaginian general Hannibal, who is considered one of the greatest generals of the ancient world. But Rome did eventually win and then controlled most of the land around the Mediterranean Sea. As the Roman Republic got really big, they had a lot of problems. The rich were getting richer because they could access more resources, but they were taking advantage of the poor. Many people became slaves, and those slaves were sent to work on farms, and then the farmers didn't have jobs anymore, and they moved themselves back to the cities. And in the cities, there were no jobs available. So there was a lot of unemployment in the Roman Republic. Things were not looking good when along came a guy named Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was named dictator for life by the Roman Senate after rising to power. Poor people really liked him because he did a lot to help them, but the rich people were very threatened by him. The Senate, which was made up of patricians, the rich class of Romans, was highly threatened by him. They had a rule in Rome that there shouldn't be kings, and so the senators stabbed him to death in the Roman Senate. There was a civil war after his death, and eventually his niece or his nephew, Octavian, came to rule. He took over Rome, and despite all of the fighting over Julius Caesar being dictator, Augustus was eventually declared emperor and ruled Rome as an empire. So there were some major changes when when Rome switched from a republic to an empire. Those are very different systems. During Augustus's life and shortly after was a period called the Pax Romana. This was the golden age of Rome, where things were really good. There was economic prosperity, people could travel safely, life was good for people in Rome. But after hundreds of years, Rome experienced a lot of instability, and there were poor leaders. Rome was too large. They had to split it in 2. The empire declined. There were problems with trade. There was too much debt. And eventually, Rome fell. There were lots of invasions from the northern part of Europe. The Germanic tribes, who would later go on to found the European Middle Ages, came and took over in Rome, literally sieged the city of Rome, took the city of Rome, and in around 480, Rome fell. And that is the end of Rome.